Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Derrick Stanford, who's Vice President of Business Development at Postmedia Parcel Services, and Jason Fry, who's Senior Business Development Manager at RouteSmart Technologies. And today we're going to talk about the parcel delivery revolution, how newspapers can leverage technology and infrastructure to diversify revenue streams. Now, for a long time, parcel was the little brother or little sister of transportation modes. And then e-commerce came along, and now parcel is the fastest growing mode of delivery. And this is creating both challenges and opportunities for the industry. And this is particularly true for newspapers. So what makes parcel delivery a good business opportunity for newspapers? How can technology help them exploit this opportunity? And what are some lessons learned to help newspapers succeed in the parcel delivery market? Well, those are the questions we're going to address in today's episode, and it's great to have Derrick and Jason on the program to share their insights and perspective and experience on this topic. So Derrick, Jason, welcome to the program.
Great. Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to be here again. Appreciate you having us on, Adrian.
So Derrick, again, thank you for being on the program. Some folks might be familiar with Postmedia Parcel Services, some folks might not. So before we dive into the program, why don't you tell us a little bit about the company and your role there?
Sure. Postmedia would be Canada's largest newspaper publishing company. We've got over 130 titles coast to coast in Canada. We're a majority owned by Chatham Financial in New Jersey, who also has a controlling stake in McClatchy in the United States. So a lot of newspapers there. But and in my role is Vice President of Business Development for the parcel portion of the business. And we were recently acquired by Postmedia exactly 12 months ago. Prior to that, we were known as Brunswick News, based in St. John, New Brunswick, Canada, and had a number of dailies in New Brunswick and weekly and community papers there.
Great. So, obviously, strong presence in the newspaper market and experience there, and now in the parcel industry as well. And we'll get into your experience and your success story there, to date. But before we get there, I guess let's ask a basic question. What makes parcel delivery a good business opportunity for newspapers to pursue?
That's a great question, Adrian. For us, it started out as an opportunity to expand revenues and, quite frankly, to survive. Our CEO at the time, Jamie Irving, was at a conference, and where Jeff Bezos was presenting, and Jeff presented the notion of delivering Amazon parcels with newspapers. Of course, he owns the Washington Post, and it was still just a concept for Jeff at the time. But Jamie left the conference thinking, that sounds like a really, really interesting idea. Anyhow, fast forward, and he was able to make some contacts within Amazon and launch a pilot in New Brunswick, Canada, and has continued to build it out. And really, it just leverages the existing infrastructure and existing network that has been there for decades and decades, and arguably was starting to fade a bit. And this has injected a lot of new life and a lot of new interest into these newspaper distribution networks across the country.
Yeah, I remember I think it was at the RouteSmart conference a couple of years ago or before COVID, and I got to learn more about again, this infrastructure and what goes into newspaper delivery. Now, I get the Wall Street Journal at my house, and I can tell you that, every once in a while, I'll get an email, like if they're predicting, bad weather, I'll get an email saying, hey, your delivery might be delayed or may not, be executed because of the weather. And even so, that paper is there by 6 o'clock in the morning. So there's a lot of just established expertise and network and infrastructure in place to be able to, even though it's been a plateauing, if not declining, number of folks that get their newspapers delivered at home, there's just a lot of decades and decades of experience and infrastructure there to make deliveries to a large number of residential homes, which is, parallel to, what a lot of companies are trying to do in the e-commerce space to deliver, a lot of the packages, right? So whether it's a package or a newspaper, you're still trying to accomplish kind of the same thing, is trying to meet customer expectations, get the delivery there on time when it's promised, in good condition and so forth, which is exactly what newspapers promise their customers as well historically. Right, Jason? Right, Derek? I mean, I think that
Yeah.
to me is kind of the parallel there.
Yeah, I think that's 100% it. The three things I think about is, what do newspapers have? What advantages do they have? Number one, they have facilities, typically at least 10,000 square feet. They have a distribution force already, carriers, and then typically they have a relationship with almost every neighborhood that they distribute to. Obviously, there's growth and those kind of things, but you're used to exactly that, right? Your packages or your newspaper's there when you show up in the morning. Your package is there when you come home from work. Lot of similarities that Derrick and the folks at Postmedia are taking advantage of, and I singularly said Derrick and Postmedia because a lot of folks have been talking about it. A lot of groups are talking about it. These guys are doing it.
Yeah. So let's stay with you, Jason. And one of the other areas where there's already some infrastructure, if you will, some capabilities already in place is on the technology side.
Yeah.
So how can technology, help newspapers expand into parcel delivery? I mean, what capabilities are important here?
Yeah, so I think there's two problems that technology solves, or that need to be solved with distribution. It's either, number one, I have existing routes. What is the best delivery order sequence to distribute X, whether it be a package, whether it be a newspaper, whether it on and on, be a magazine, on and on and on. And the second is, hey, I've got this universe of stops to be made. How do I best deploy my resources? In other words, how many routes do I need? And then what delivery order sequence best meets the needs, because you want your Crocs before 10 a.m. and I want my toaster oven after 4 p.m. So those two are the two main questions that technology can answer. Specifically, when it comes to RouteSmart, we have a web service called Routing as a Service, or RAS, which can be called API. That's what the folks at Postmedia are calling. That's what a number of large parcel distributors here in the U.S. are using each day. And via the API, they submit a data set to the service. The service returns the answer based on the type of routing that they're doing, based on the parameters that they're providing. And it's a key cog to how the truck gets loaded, to how the parcels get distributed every day, each and every day. If you get a package, there's a high probability in the US, there's a high probability that your address went through RouteSmart software. As it's turning out, as you receive more and more packages, or as Postmedia distributes more and more packages in Canada, if you get a package in Canada, there's a high probability your address went through RouteSmart's technology software.
And I think what's interesting is that, folks that are, I would say, relatively new to parcel delivery, the optimization problems is very different than if they've been historically doing truckload, optimization or truckload deliveries, right? Because here you're talking about, high density type of routes. You're talking about a dynamic, every delivery, the number of places you have to visit varies by day, and where they are varies by day. Again, so I think that's another thing here, that the optimization engine itself and the type of optimization is different than doing truckload or LTL type of optimization, right?
Not only that, there's a difference between delivering, let's say, washer and dryer, and there are, what you might be able to, and you have to do installation. So there might be 10, 20, maybe 25 stops a day, versus parcels, which can, I think on average is about 80 to 120 parcels. And then when we get to peak season after Black Friday and on through through middle of February, Derrick, is closer to 250, 300. I mean, these parcel guys and gals are doing a heck of a lot of work in a very short amount of time. So the optimization is key to getting that done. Any misstep, and I mean for the actual driver themselves, because we all see them hustling. Any misturn, any inefficiency in time or mileage is really reflected in the bottom line.
Right. So Derrick, let's kind of learn more about let's ground this in actual operations. I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit about your operations? I mean, how are you using technology to in your delivery operations, and what benefits have you been able to achieve so far?
It's a great question. It's an interesting story, because Brunswick News was a legacy RouteSmart customer, and in this industry, in the newspaper industry, because it's been arguably under siege since the internet got popular in the late 90s, there hasn't been a lot of really big technical investment in the newspaper industry, probably because a lot of newspapers couldn't afford it. So out of necessity, we created our own parcel application on commercially available products like RouteSmart, but also Salesforce.com and Domo for dashboarding and reporting. And we had to build it from scratch because there was nothing out there for us to buy per se. And since we were already a RouteSmart customer, that formed the nucleus of our application. So that being said, we went on to build it out for our entire organization. So for customer service, distribution, editorial, even advertising, was able to leverage the same infrastructure. And now that we've been recently acquired, our parent company, Postmedia, is looking to take the same infrastructure and continue to build it out because, again, the newspaper industry is starving for innovation and starving for new technology. And that's how we basically got involved with Postmedia. Was we were primarily an East Coast Canada company, and part of my job when I was first hired was to find newspapers across the country that we could sign up, given our relationship with Amazon, and help them distribute more Amazon parcels across Canada. And one of the first organizations we signed up was Postmedia. And as the old saying goes, they liked the product so much they bought the company. And one of the primary drivers for this acquisition was to get their hands on both the parcel business, but also the parcel technology infrastructure. So it's been a real game changer for us. And in addition to sort of the volume going through our channels, we also make a small commission, again, leveraging the infrastructure for newspapers across Canada who help deliver our parcels on our behalf. So it's been both an enabler and even a revenue generator for us.
Great. And you know, Jason, do you see similar types of trends with other customers that you have? I mean, are they looking to move down this road as well? And you know, what other benefits or ways of leveraging technology have they been able to accomplish?
So back to what I said earlier, I think a lot of groups have been talking about it, and I don't mean recently. I mean for a number of years. I think what Derrick said there toward the end of his comment was, look, they've done a couple of things, maybe accidentally, but accidentally on purpose, right? So they built everything with commercially off-the-shelf available software. That means if you want to deploy this at your newspaper, they add licenses and you're off and running. Very shallow curve to get up and running. I think what they've done is the path. You know, we're working hard with Derrick and with Postmedia to you know, really talk about, hey, they've done it, lay it in. So you know, there's a phrase within the industry: extend the runway. How do we extend the runway? And I hate that phrase. Here these guys are paving a new runway. So forget the old runway. Well, maybe not forget it, but let's improve on what we're doing. Let's pivot to something that can be a revenue generator. That's a new way of looking at the advantages that we already have.
So you know, Derrick, you know, as a way to wrap up, then, I mean, based on what you've learned so far and your experience to date, I mean, any words of advice or lessons learned for companies that, you know, want to enter the parcel delivery market? I mean, that will help them succeed?
Sure. I mean, it's great. Thanks, Jason. No, it's a good question because there's a couple of neat things to think of. One is, you know, at first we had some initial success and things are going well, and then the gig economy really took over with regards to, you know, your Skip the Dishes, DoorDash, Uber Eats, that kind of model, Pigeon Ship in Utah. A lot of different models came into place, which are cool, but the notion of having a dedicated delivery force is still really important to a lot of shippers out there. So again, we were able to you know, make ourselves unique in the market in that we provide that dedicated service and not necessarily just someone who's on call or someone who's using an app looking for stuff to do that. But you know, so we've been able to coexist with that whole genre of delivery services, and also I'd argue compete against them somewhat when they really sort of exploded a couple of years ago. The dust has settled a bit now, and we've been able to carve out our own niche and quite a stable niche, and looking to build upon that. So that was sort of one thing I wanted to call out there, because there's been a lot of interest in that. And then the other is the notion of people, again, I mentioned it before, being so starved for an idea like this, as Jason said, and the ability to spin it up and add more customers and add more newspapers is really remarkably simple. Now there has been a lot of things to sort of navigate our way through with regards to the scheduling, right? So newspapers have a very fixed schedule. As you said earlier on, you get up, get your Wall Street Journal, it's there at 6 a.m. You know, the notion of people getting their parcels at 6 a.m. was a bit foreign to start with, but people have come to appreciate it. But it's a lot of orchestrating to get you know, the delivery times from the shippers, meet the newspaper printing schedule, the newspaper distribution schedule. So a lot of things need to take place in a short window of time overnight to make all this work. And of course, being in Canada, we've got to contend with the winter, and thank God that's almost over now. But it was a lot of work to sync up all the schedules, and some days we still have our challenges. But even the more unique thing now is a lot of newspapers are looking to go digital. So the reliance on the newspaper schedule is actually lessening up. So we're almost evolving from a company that used to print and deliver newspapers along with some parcels to a parcel delivery company that also does digital and physical newspapers. So it's still happening in real time, but it's been fascinating to watch that evolution.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, it sounds like, you know, a couple of things, you know, going back to your point about gig drivers and having your own drivers. I think part of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, you know, it's really about controlling the brand, or, you know, owning the end customer experience.
Right.
Because I think sometimes, you know, there might be a perception or reality from the part of the customers that, you know, and from companies like yourselves, that if these drivers aren't really your employees, they're not, you know, wearing your name, you know, your company name, so on and so forth, you know, at the end of the day, you're responsible for the end customer experience. So, you know, by having your own drivers, you at least have greater control over, you know, making sure that you're fulfilling that promise and maximizing, you know, the end customer experience, particularly if any issues, you know, come up. So I'm kind of curious if that's part of it, you know, in terms of the rationale there. And you know, I think the other piece I think was interesting was, you know, that there's some change management involved, right? So it's sort of like, you know, we can't try to fit this partial piece, you know, a square peg in a round hole type of thing. You know, we need to really take a step back and say, hey, in this hybrid environment, we need to change our processes a little bit. We need to think a little bit more holistically. And there is going to we need to think differently, and we need to change our processes in order to succeed here. So that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, no, those are two great points. I mean, with regards to the first point, the gig economy certainly has its spot, and there are a lot of shippers for whom that works just great with. But you're exactly right. When you need the deep integration that we have with some of the major shippers, who, whether it's parcel tracking or all of the parcel updates, are, you know, we've got a mobile element to our parcel app that's downloadable on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store. So carriers just use their phones as, you know, for the proof of delivery, for all of the parcel tracking updates. But when you look at the integration requirements that someone like an Amazon has, they're pretty deep, and that requires a pretty big commitment with regards to, you know, versions of the software and quality assurance testing of the software. I mean, it's got to be 24/7, 365. We send parcel update statuses to Amazon or to all of our shippers every 15 minutes. So when it comes to deep integration requirements and that really, really robust reporting, absolutely critical. And then with regards to the scheduling, yeah, you're right. It's very dynamic, and it's still evolving. As our parcel business has grown, when we've looked to optimize trucking, you know, in many cases, these days it's the newspaper schedule shifting a little bit to help with the parcels, versus when we first started this out, parcels had to take a back seat, and the newspapers were always king. But it's happening in real time, and where and whenever possible, we're always looking to improve efficiencies and marry the two to provide that best customer experience for both the newspaper reader and the parcel recipient. So a lot of ongoing care and feeding to to make that seamless.
I tell you what, Derrick, you did a great job of paring that conversation down that we had. That was about an hour and a half last time. We were to about 3-4 minutes there. But well done, sir. Well done.
Thanks.
Jason, anything to add there? Words of advice or lessons learned for newspapers that are looking to get into the parcel delivery market?
Like with anything else, we're talking about a low barrier to entry and the ease of this. At the end of the day, there is no easy button. It's going to require some work, but the payoff is exponential. I think Derrick would back that coming up fully. So, stop talking about it and be about it. Let's do it.
Great. Well, even though there's been a slight dip in e-commerce activity over the past few months, certainly in the beginning of this year, and volumes have been down, the long-term growth rate and the long-term projection is for this market to continue to grow, in the years ahead. And I think, as a lot of companies have realized, is that you used to think about the big three, and you almost thought about that there was kind of infinite capacity in the parcel space. And particularly, during the COVID times, you realize that there isn't infinite capacity in parcel, and there's a lot of opportunity for and need for other carriers to enter this market, other service providers to enter this market to meet this growing need. So I think for newspapers to really look at this opportunity and help fill that void that is only going to continue to get bigger as the market continues to grow, I think is a smart business choice. And I think Derrick, I think your company is a great provides a great case study in what the benefits are and how to get started on this. So again, Derrick, Jason, thank you both for making the time to be on the program and to share your insights and perspectives on this topic.
Great. No, thank you very much. It was wonderful to be able to participate.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it, Derrick. Good to see you again. Look forward to seeing you
too.
in person.
Great. I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the RouteSmart website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question for Derrick or Jason, you can submit it there, and I'm sure they'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.